I always dreamed of the perfect wedding, a soft melody in the air, the scent of roses, my friends, laughter echoing through the hall. And on that day, everything looked exactly as I'd imagined. The white lilies lined the aisle, my dress shimmered under the chandeliers, and my heart raced as I watched my soon-to-be husband waiting for me at the altar. His name was Ethan. We met 5 years ago at a charity gala. He wasn't the type to talk much, but his eyes carried this quiet warmth like he saw the world in ways others didn't. He was thoughtful, steady, the kind of man everyone could rely on, or at least that's what I believed. The ceremony went beautifully. The vows, the kiss, the tears, all of it felt magical. Our guests clapped as we walked down the aisle hand in hand, my heart swelling with gratitude. I thought, this is the start of forever. But then came the moment that shattered that illusion, the first dance. The lights dimmed. The soft notes of a piano began to play. I smiled, waiting for him to turn to me. Instead, Ethan took the microphone from the DJ. He cleared his throat, his voice calm but trembling slightly. "This dance," he said, "is for the woman I've loved for 10 years. The room went quiet. For a second, I didn't even process it. I smiled awkwardly, assuming he meant me, maybe he was just being poetic. But then I saw where his eyes went. Not toward me, not toward his mother. Not toward the crowd, but toward a woman standing in the corner, a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful in a haunting sort of way. Shoulder-length dark hair, a pale blue dress, and eyes that glistened like she carried the weight of every memory he ever had. My heart froze. Ethan walked toward her slowly, his gaze locked on hers. The room stayed silent, guests exchanging confused glances. I felt my stomach twist as he reached out his hand. "Would you dance with me?" he asked. The woman shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Ethan, this isn't right," she whispered, but he insisted. "Just one dance." The DJ, not knowing what to do, let the song continue. And as the melody swelled, Ethan took her hand right there in front of everyone and began to dance. The whispers began almost instantly. "Who is she? Is that his ex? Oh my God, what is happening?" I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the world had tilted beneath my feet. Every smile, every promise, every kiss suddenly questioned. They moved in slow circles as if time had folded around them. The way he looked at her, I had never seen that look before. Not even when he said, "I do." When the song ended, the woman pulled away. She ran out of the hall, crying. Ethan stood there, frozen, as if waking from a dream. Then he turned, and for the first time our eyes met. The color drained from his face. "Grace," he said softly, "please let me explain." Explain. What was there to explain? That on our wedding day, he publicly confessed love to another woman. I felt the tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. I walked past him, past the crowd, past the photographers, and straight into the corridor. My maid of honor, Lily, came after me. "Grace, wait, he must have meant something else," she pleaded. But I shook my head. "No, Lily, you saw his eyes." I found an empty room, closed the door, and finally let the tears fall. The sound of laughter and music from the reception hall felt distant, like a cruel reminder of what the day was supposed to be. After a while, there was a knock. It was Ethan. He looked pale, his tie undone, his expression torn between guilt and desperation. "Grace, please," he said softly, "just hear me out." I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "She was someone from my past," he began. "Someone I thought I'd never see again." "That doesn't make it better," I snapped. "You made our wedding about her." He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. 10 years ago, she saved my life. Literally, I was in a car accident. She pulled me out before it exploded. I was unconscious for weeks after. When I woke up, she was gone. I searched for her for years, but she disappeared. That song, it's the one that was playing when it happened. I promised that if I ever saw her again, I'd dance to it with her to thank her properly." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" "Because I didn't think she existed anymore," he whispered. "And when I saw her today, I didn't think, I just reacted." His explanation sounded sincere, almost too sincere, but still something felt off. The way he'd looked at her wasn't gratitude, it was longing, and deep down I knew there was more he wasn't telling me. That night after the guests left and the photographers packed up, Ethan fell asleep beside me in the hotel's suite. I couldn't. I sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, my heart in pieces. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It read, "You don't know the truth about Ethan. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Come alone." My blood ran cold. The sender, the woman in the blue dress. I didn't sleep that night. The words from that message kept flashing through my mind. "You don't know the truth about Ethan. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Come alone." The woman in the blue dress. the same woman my husband had confessed to in front of everyone. I sat there, staring at the message for hours, wondering if it was a trap, or if maybe it was my chance to get the truth Ethan wasn't telling me. By morning, I made up my mind. I left Ethan sleeping in the hotel room, scribbled a short note. I need some air, and slipped out quietly. My dress from the night before still hung on the chair, a painful reminder of the dream that had shattered before it even began. The message had given me an address, a small cafe near the riverfront. When I arrived, she was already there. The woman in the blue dress. But this time, she wasn't dressed elegantly. She wore a simple cardigan, her hair tied back, and her eyes, they looked tired. Like someone who hadn't slept in years. When she saw me, she stood up immediately. "Grace," I nodded cautiously. She gestured for me to sit. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," I said quietly. After what he did, why should I trust anything you say?" She looked down. "You shouldn't," she admitted softly. "But you need to hear this." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy, like it carried too much truth. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph, a younger Ethan, maybe 20 years old, standing beside a woman who looked just like her. I frowned. "That's you." "Yes," she whispered. "My name is Isabella. Ethan and I, we weren't just friends, we were engaged." The words hit me like a punch. "Engaged," I repeated, my voice trembling. "He told me he'd never been married, never even proposed before." She nodded slowly. "He wouldn't have told you." Because our story didn't end the way normal ones do. She took a shaky breath and continued. 10 years ago, we were in love. We were young and reckless, planning a future together. One night, after a fight about his career, he drove off angry. That's when the accident happened. I followed his car, and when I saw it crash, I ran to pull him out. But when the ambulance arrived, they only took him. Her eyes filled with tears. I was badly injured too. I went into a coma for months. By the time I woke up, Ethan had disappeared. His family told me he thought I'd died in the crash. My hands went cold. "So he thought you were gone," she nodded. "He moved on, but he never knew I survived. I spent years recovering, moving between hospitals and therapy. When I finally looked him up, I found out he was getting married. To you." For a second, everything stopped. I felt the floor vanish beneath me, like my whole world had tilted again. "So that's why he looked at you that way," I whispered. "He thought he was seeing a ghost." Isabella's eyes softened. "Yes, and when he asked me to dance, I think part of him was trying to say goodbye, but Grace..." She hesitated. "There's something you still need to know." I looked up sharply. "What now?" She swallowed hard. "The accident, it wasn't random. Someone tampered with his brakes that night. It wasn't just a crash, it was a setup." My heart pounded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she whispered, "that Ethan's father, your new father-in-law, wanted me gone. He never approved of me. He told Ethan that if I stayed in his life, he'd lose his inheritance, his company, everything. I think he found a way to end it permanently." I sat there in stunned silence. Everything I thought I knew about my husband, his calmness, his strength, his sadness, suddenly made sense. The shadows in his eyes, the way he sometimes looked lost even when smiling, he was carrying a ghost. And now that ghost was sitting right in front of me. "Does Ethan know?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, he still believes it was an accident. I didn't want to ruin his life again. But when I saw him at the wedding, when I saw the man he'd become, I realized he's living a lie, and you deserve to know it." I pressed my hands against my temples. "I don't know what to think anymore. He's been lying by omission, but his father..." I stopped. "Why tell me all this now?" She looked at me with a trembling voice. "Because you remind me of me, and I can't watch another woman get hurt by the same family." For a long time, we just sat there in silence. Then she reached for her purse, pulled out a small silver pendant, and placed it on the table. "This was mine," she said. "It was in the car that night. If you want proof, show it to Ethan. He'll recognize it." When I returned to the hotel, Ethan was pacing the room, his eyes red from worry. "Grace, where were you?" I thought something happened. I cut him off. "You lied to me, Ethan." He froze. "What?" I threw the pendant on the bed. "Does this look familiar?" His face drained of color. He picked it up slowly, his fingers trembling. "Where did you..." "I met her," I said coldly. "I met Isabella." The silence that followed was deafening. He sat down, his head in his hands. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he whispered. "I didn't even know she was alive." Tears stung my eyes. "Then why didn't you tell me about her at all? About your engagement, about the crash, everything?" He looked up at me, his voice breaking. "Because I didn't want to lose you, Grace. Because I didn't want my past to ruin our future." I turned away, unable to look at him. "It already has." He reached for me, but I pulled back. "I need time," I said softly. "And space. Please don't follow me." And with that, I walked out of the room, out of the hotel, out of the marriage I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. That night, I stayed with Lily. She hugged me tightly as I broke down, my wedding ring still on my hand. "He loves you," she said gently. "Maybe," I whispered, "but he's still in love with her ghost." The next morning, I woke up in Lily's guest room, still wearing yesterday's clothes, mascara smudged, eyes swollen. The wedding ring on my finger felt heavier than ever, like it belonged to someone else. Lily handed me a cup of coffee. "You have to decide what you're going to do, Grace," she said gently. "You can't hide forever." I sighed. "I'm not hiding, I'm trying to understand how my whole life changed in one day." She hesitated. "Do you still love him?" The question lingered in the air like fog. Did I? Yes, but love didn't feel safe anymore. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. I stared at his name flashing on the screen, my heart racing, and let it ring out. A second later, a text arrived. "Ethan, please, Grace, come home. I found something you need to see." Something inside me said I shouldn't go, that I should give myself time. But curiosity, it always wins when your heart's been cracked open. An hour later, I was standing at the door of our apartment. Ethan opened it before I could knock. He looked exhausted, eyes red, tie loosened, hair uncombed. Like he hadn't slept either. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I didn't come for you," I replied. "I came for answers." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll give you one." He led me into the living room. On the table was an old metal box, dented, covered in dust, sealed with a latch. He took a deep breath and opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, neatly folded, bound with a faded ribbon. Each one was addressed in the same handwriting, "To Ethan, if you ever forgive me." My heart skipped. Who wrote these? He picked up the top letter, unfolded it, and handed it to me. My father. I stared at the paper, the shaky handwriting, the dated ink, and began to read. "I know." That night I returned to Ethan and told him everything. His face went pale. "I can't believe he'd do this." I placed a hand on his arm. "Ethan, listen to me. This isn't just about your father's sins anymore. It's about what you'll do next." He looked at me, eyes filled with pain and determination. "I'll expose him," he said quietly, "no matter what it costs." And as he said those words, I finally saw the man I married. Not the broken one haunted by the past, but someone ready to face it. But deep down, I had no idea that what would come next would destroy everything we thought we knew and tear us apart again. The next morning felt eerily quiet. Too quiet for the chaos that was about to unfold. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the skyline as if the answers were hidden somewhere in those gray clouds. The letters from his father were spread across the table, each one more damning than the last. I could tell he hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, but there was a new kind of focus in them, a cold, determined fire. "I'm going to him," he said finally. I froze. "Ethan, no, you can't just walk into your father's house with this. You don't know what he's capable of." He turned to me, voice steady. "Grace, I've lived my entire life in his shadow. Every decision, every success, it all had his fingerprints on it. I let him control me, but not anymore." I took a deep breath. "Then I'm coming with you." He hesitated. "It could get ugly." "I'm not afraid of ugly," I said. "Not after everything that's already happened." His father's mansion sat on the edge of the city, a sprawling estate surrounded by black iron gates and silence that felt heavy with secrets. When we arrived, the butler gave us a nervous look before letting us in. "Mr. Turner is in his study," he murmured. The same study where Ethan had found the letters. We walked down the long marble corridor, each step echoing like a countdown. Ethan's jaw tightened as we reached the heavy oak doors. He didn't knock. He just pushed them open. His father looked up from behind a massive desk, the kind that seemed designed to remind people of power. Even in his 60s, Richard Turner carried himself like a man no one dared cross. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Ethan," he said coolly, "you look terrible. Is that how a newlywed presents himself?" Ethan slammed the box of letters onto the desk. "Cut the act, Dad." Richard's expression didn't change. "Excuse me?" "I found them," Ethan said, voice trembling with fury. "The letters, the truth about Isabella, about the crash, about you." For the first time, I saw something flicker across Richard's face, a split second of recognition, quickly replaced by a cold smirk. "So," he said quietly, leaning back in his chair, "you finally went digging where you shouldn't have." Ethan clenched his fists. "You tried to have her killed. She found evidence of your corruption, didn't she?" Richard stood slowly, his presence filling the room. "You don't understand what was at stake. That girl was naive. She could have destroyed everything this family built." "Everything you built on lies," Ethan shot back. She loved me, she didn't deserve that. Richard's tone sharpened. And what about me, son? I did what I had to do to protect you. You would have gone down with her if the investigation had gone public. I saved your life. Ethan's voice broke. You call that saving? I watched as the air between them grew thick with decades of unspoken resentment. Two men, father and son, standing on opposite sides of a truth neither could fully bear. Richard exhaled sharply and turned to me. And you, he said. You're the wife, the innocent one. Tell me, Grace, do you really believe this nonsense? Or do you think maybe she's manipulating him? I stepped forward, anger burning in my chest. I met Isabella, she's alive, and she remembers everything. The crash wasn't an accident. His eyes narrowed. Then she should have stayed dead. The words sliced through the air. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing his father by the collar. Don't you ever say that again. Richard didn't flinch. You think you're a better man than me? You wouldn't exist without my decisions, without my sacrifices. Ethan's voice trembled with emotion. You destroyed lives, Dad. That's not sacrifice, that's cruelty. Suddenly, Richard's tone softened, too soft, too deliberate. You don't know the full story, Ethan, he said quietly. You never did. What do you mean? He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an envelope. Before you throw your life away chasing ghosts, read this. Then decide if you still hate me. Ethan hesitated, then ripped the envelope open. Inside was a single page, a DNA test. He froze. His eyes darted between the paper and his father, confusion clouding his face. This can't be right, he whispered. I stepped closer. What does it say? His voice cracked. It says that Isabella isn't just my ex, she's my half-sister. The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Richard's expression hardened again. She was the result of a mistake I made long before you were born. I paid her mother to disappear, but she came back years later, working under an alias. When you met her, neither of you knew. I kept it that way for your sake. Ethan stumbled back, his face pale. You're lying. I wish I were, Richard said coldly. But that's the truth. That's why I had to end it. You were engaged to your own sister. I felt the air leave my lungs. The room spun. Ethan looked shattered, like his entire world had caved in. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, this isn't real. You made this up to cover your own sins. Richard's voice was eerily calm. Believe what you want, but those test results are official. I have no reason to fake them. Ethan tore the paper in half, his breathing ragged. You'll say anything to protect yourself, but I swear I'm going to find the truth, and if I find out you hurt her, I'll make sure the world knows. He grabbed my hand. Let's go, Grace. We turned to leave, but Richard's voice stopped us cold. She already knows, Ethan. Why do you think she disappeared after the crash? She found out before you did. That's why she ran. Ethan froze. Slowly, his grip on my hand loosened. I whispered, Ethan, don't listen to him. But his expression had changed. The determination in his eyes was now laced with something darker, disbelief, fear, and heartbreak all at once. If that's true, he said quietly, then she's been lying to me too. As we walked out of that mansion, the world outside felt colder, heavier. The truth wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about identity, about who Ethan really was and who he had unknowingly loved. That night, Ethan sat in silence, staring at the shredded test paper on the table. I wanted to comfort him, but there are wounds love can't reach. Finally, he spoke. Grace, if this is true, I can't live with it. I need to find out for sure. I nodded gently. Then let's find the truth together. He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. And if it is true, I hesitated because I didn't have an answer. Ethan confronts Isabella with the shocking DNA test, and what she reveals next will change everything they thought they knew about Richard and about love itself. The next day, the world felt unreal. Ethan hadn't spoken a word since we left his father's mansion. He sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the shredded DNA results, his wedding band glinting faintly under the morning light. He looked broken, like a man who'd lost not just his faith in others, but in himself. I made coffee, even though I knew he wouldn't drink it. Ethan, I said softly, you can't believe him. Your father's trying to manipulate you. It's what he's always done. He didn't respond. Finally, he whispered, what if he's not lying, Grace? What if everything I felt for Isabella was wrong? I reached for his hand. Love doesn't become dirty just because someone twisted it. You didn't know. He looked up at me, pain in his eyes. But she did. Later that afternoon, Ethan called Isabella. She didn't answer. He left a message, calm, measured, but trembling beneath the surface. We need to talk, please. It's about something my father said about us. Hours passed. Nothing. Then, finally, she texted back, meet me at the old pier. Sunset, alone. When he told me I wanted to go with him, but he shook his head. This is something I need to face myself. Something in his tone made me nod. I watched him leave, his figure disappearing into the fading light, and something deep in my chest told me that when he came back, he wouldn't be the same. The sun was dipping low when Ethan arrived at the pier. The waves crashed gently against the wooden posts, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. Isabella stood at the edge, her hair blowing in the wind. She turned when she heard his footsteps, her face pale but calm, like she already knew what he was going to say. "Ethan," she whispered. He stopped a few feet away, holding the torn DNA paper in his hand. "You knew, didn't you?" She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Yes," his voice cracked. "Since when?" "Since the day I woke up from the coma," she said softly. "Your father came to see me. He told me everything. About the affair. About the blood tests, about you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And you never thought I deserved to know." She took a trembling breath. "You were broken enough, Ethan. You'd already lost everything. I didn't want to destroy you with that truth. I thought if I stayed away, you'd move on, you'd find peace." He shook his head slowly. "Peace? You call what I've lived peace?" Her tears fell freely now. "I thought it was mercy." He stepped closer, voice low but trembling. "You could have told me the truth, Isabella. We could have handled it, but instead you let me mourn you and you let me marry someone else while you watched from the shadows." She flinched. "You think that was easy for me, watching you love another woman, watching you build a life I could never have." He exhaled shakily. "Then why show up at my wedding?" Her eyes filled with guilt. "Because your father sent someone after me again. He found out I was alive. I thought if I showed myself in public, if people saw me, he wouldn't dare try to finish what he started. I didn't expect you to recognize me. I didn't expect." Her voice broke. "You'd still love me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind and the soft rhythm of the waves. Then Ethan said, barely above a whisper, "Isabella, I don't know what's true anymore, but I need to know one thing. Was he telling the truth about us?" She hesitated. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Finally, she said, "I thought so too, until I ran my own test last month." Ethan's heart stopped. "What?" She pulled a folded document from her purse, this one crisp, new, stamped with an official seal. "I didn't believe him," she said, "so I tested it myself. Ethan, we're not related." He blinked in shock. "What?" She nodded through her tears. "Your father faked the first results. He wanted to separate us to protect his name. He used his power to bury everything. He even bribed a lab to produce fake DNA data years ago. The man who caused the crash wasn't acting alone, it was all orchestrated by him." Ethan's expression twisted from disbelief to rage. "My father ruined 2 lives to protect his company." Isabella's voice trembled. "More than 2, Ethan. He ruined yours, mine, and hers." "Hers?" She looked at him sadly. "Grace, you think you're the only one living in his shadow. You married into a family built on lies. Richard's influence reaches everyone close to you. Even now, you're in danger because you're the only one who knows the truth." Ethan felt dizzy, his thoughts spinning. "Then we have to go public," he said. "Expose everything, clear your name." She shook her head. "It's not that simple. If we do, he'll destroy us both. And Grace, she'll be dragged through it too. You'll lose everything." He looked at her fiercely. "Then let him." "I'd rather lose everything than live another day chained to his lies." She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Ethan, I don't want you to lose your soul." He looked at her, the woman he'd once loved more than life itself. The woman who was now the key to his destruction and his redemption. Tears welled in his eyes. "Maybe it's already too late for that." That night, he came home silent. I was waiting, pacing the living room, my heart pounding. When he walked in, I knew. His eyes told me everything. "What happened?" I whispered. He sank onto the couch, exhausted. "She's not my sister. My father faked it all." I froze. "What?" He looked at me with tears streaming down his face. "He lied to protect himself. The accident, the test, everything, it was all his doing. He's been controlling every part of my life, even who I could love." I sat beside him, wrapping my sound outside, the crunch of gravel under tires. Ethan moved to the window, peering through a slit in the curtain. A black SUV had stopped on the dirt road. 2 men stepped out, suits gleaming under the misty dawn. He turned sharply. "They found us." Isabella's eyes widened. "We need to go now." She grabbed a flash drive from her desk and shoved it into Ethan's hand. "Everything's on this. Take it to Corinne Doyle. She's clean. She'll know what to do." "What about you?" I asked. "I'll hold them off," she said, pulling a small pistol from a drawer. "You two run." Ethan hesitated. "Isabella," she looked at him with fierce, teary eyes. "Go, Ethan, for once don't look back." We ran through the back door, sprinting into the fog. Behind us, shouts erupted, followed by the echo of gunfire. Ethan pulled me down behind a fallen tree, his breath ragged. I clutched his hand. "Is she?" He shook his head, his face pale. "We can't stop. If we stop, none of this will matter. We kept running, the cliffs looming ahead, the crash of waves below us growing louder with every step. When we finally reached the edge, Ethan stopped, his chest heaving. "We have to get this to Doyle." I nodded, but before I could speak, headlights appeared through the fog, speeding straight toward us. Ethan turned, eyes wide. "He's here." And as the car skidded to a stop just feet away, the door opened and out stepped Richard Hawthorne, very much alive, very much in control. He smiled coldly. "You should have stayed quiet, son." The wind howled over the cliffs, carrying the scent of the sea and gunpowder. Ethan stood frozen, the flash drive clenched tightly in his hand. I could feel his pulse racing through my fingers as I gripped his arm. Richard Hawthorne stepped out of the black car like a man walking into his own empire, calm, certain, unshakable. His expensive coat whipped around him as the ocean wind tore at the edges. "I warned you, son," he said, voice steady, cold. "You had one chance to stay silent." Ethan's voice cracked with anger. "You faked a heart attack. You've lied about everything, about me, about her, about our family. For what? To protect your company." Richard tilted his head. "To protect the legacy that you are too weak to understand." He took a step closer, his eyes landing on me. "And you must be the wife," he said with a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Grace, isn't it? You should have known better than to get tangled in our business." I stood my ground, even though my knees trembled. "You destroyed your own son's life." He chuckled, shaking his head. "No, dear, I built his life. Everything he has, everything he is, came from me, and if I have to destroy him to keep it clean, I will." Ethan moved protectively in front of me. "You won't touch her." Richard's smile faltered for the first time. "You point a gun at your own father." Ethan didn't hesitate. "You stopped being my father the day you killed Mom." The air went still. My breath caught. "Ethan, what did you just say?" Richard's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." Ethan's eyes blazed. "The accident wasn't an accident, was it? You sabotaged her car after she found out about Isabella's mother, your affair. She tried to leave you and you couldn't handle it, so you made sure she never would." Richard's face turned cold as stone. "You should be careful what you accuse me of." The tension snapped. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing his father by the collar. "You ruined her life, Isabella's, mine, and now you want to take Grace too." Richard shoved him back hard, shouting, "Everything I did was to protect you." Ethan stumbled, but his rage burned brighter. "Protect me? You turned me into your puppet." I stepped forward, my voice shaking but firm. "It ends tonight. We're done running from your lies." Richard turned toward me, his eyes narrowing. "Oh, Grace, you think you know what's at stake. You don't. You never did." He reached into his coat pocket. For a heartbeat, I thought he was reaching for a weapon, but instead he pulled out his phone. He held it up, showing a video. It was Isabella tied to a chair, her face bruised, her eyes swollen with fear. "If you want her to live," Richard said, his tone almost gentle, "you'll hand over the flash drive right now." Ethan froze, his voice dropped to a whisper. You have her." Richard smiled. "She's leverage. I needed you to come to me, and now you have." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're a monster." He ignored me, his eyes locked on Ethan. "Give me the drive and I'll let her go. Be smart, son. You can still walk away from this with your wife. Start over." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You expect me to believe you'll actually let her live?" Richard's smile faded. "You don't have a choice." The wind roared louder now, whipping at our hair and clothes. The waves crashed violently against the rocks below. Ethan's hand trembled as he held the flash drive over the cliff's edge. "Stop!" I cried. "Ethan, don't do it." He turned to me, his eyes glassy with tears. "If I don't, she dies, Grace." Richard's voice boomed. "Drop it." For a long second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Ethan looked back at his father, eyes blazing with pain and defiance. "You taught me one thing, Dad, never trust a liar." He opened his hand and the flash drive slipped through his fingers, vanishing into the sea below. Richard's expression twisted in fury. "You fool." He lunged forward, grabbing Ethan by the throat. The two men struggled, feet sliding dangerously close to the cliff's edge. I screamed, "Ethan!" and rushed toward them, grabbing his arm just as the wind howled stronger. Richard's grip tightened. "If I can't control you, I'll end this myself." Ethan shoved back with everything he had, and suddenly Richard's footing slipped. There was a sharp crack of stone and then silence. I looked down, frozen in shock. Richard Hawthorne was gone. The ocean swallowed him whole. For a long moment, Ethan stood there, staring into the waves, breathing hard. Tears mixed with the salt of the sea as he whispered, "He's gone." I took his hand, shaking. "Ethan, we have to leave before anyone finds us here." But he didn't move. His voice was hollow. "Grace, he took her, Isabella." I looked at him, heart pounding. "Then we find her, we finish this." He turned to me slowly, his face pale but determined. "There's something I never told you," he said quietly. "Before the wedding." Isabella sent me something, a recording. I frowned. A recording, he nodded, pulling a small device from his pocket. She said if anything ever happened to her, I'd know what to do. He pressed play. Her voice came through, weak but urgent. Ethan, if you're hearing this, your father isn't the only one behind the crash. There's someone else, someone inside your company, someone closer than you think. Ethan looked up at me, horror dawning in his eyes. Grace, she said you were involved. The sound of the waves crashed in the distance, but all I could hear was the echo of her voice through that tiny recorder. Grace, she was part of it. My heart dropped. Ethan's eyes were locked on me, wild and confused. His breathing quickened as if the world had just tilted beneath his feet. I stepped back, my voice shaking. Ethan, that's not true. You have to believe me. He held the recorder tighter. Then why would she say your name, Grace? Why you? I don't know, I cried. I swear I don't know. But even as I said it, a memory flashed, a face I had buried deep in my past. Richard Hawthorne. And suddenly I realized what Isabella might have found. Grace, Ethan said again, voice low, trembling, tell me the truth. Did my father know you before we met? The question hit like lightning. I hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. His eyes darkened. You did. Tears burned my eyes. Ethan, please listen to me. It wasn't what you think. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. Then tell me what it is, because right now it sounds like the woman I married has been lying to me since the beginning. I took a shaky breath. Yes, I met your father before you. He froze. I continued, voice trembling. It was years ago, before I even knew who you were. I worked as a junior accountant for one of his companies. I didn't know what he was really involved in until it was too late. I found irregularities in the ledgers, offshore transfers, shell donations. I reported it to compliance. And he found out, Ethan said darkly. I nodded. He called me to his office, told me to keep quiet or he'd ruin my career. I quit the next day. I thought it was over. Ethan's hands ran through his hair, pacing in disbelief. So all this time you were part of his world. Not by choice, I snapped. I tried to forget. When I met you, I didn't even know you were his son. You hid your last name from me, remember? His face twisted with guilt because it was true. We stood in silence, the sea wind cutting through us. Finally, he said, then why did Isabella say your name? I swallowed hard. Because she found out. She must have seen my file in his records and assumed I was working for him. Ethan looked away, his voice hollow. Can you blame her? Everyone around him was paid off, used, controlled. I wasn't, I said firmly. I loved you. That's the only truth that's ever mattered to me. He didn't respond. Hours later, we found a small, empty cabin near the forest edge and took shelter there. Ethan didn't say a word as he sat by the window, staring into the dark. I tried to speak several times, but the distance between us was heavier than silence. Finally, I whispered, Ethan, do you hate me? He turned, his eyes tired. No, he said softly. I just don't know who to trust anymore. That broke me more than anger ever could. The night grew cold. I wrapped a blanket around myself and stared at the dying fire. And then faint headlights flickered through the trees. I stiffened. Ethan, someone's coming. He grabbed his gun and peeked out the window. Get down. The headlights stopped. A figure stepped out slow, limping, clutching her side. My heart skipped. That's Isabella. Ethan ran to the door, throwing it open. Isabella! She collapsed in his arms, blood seeping through her shirt. He carried her inside, laying her on the couch. What happened? She coughed weakly, gripping his sleeve. Your father's men, they didn't stop, but I got away. I knelt beside her, pressing a towel to her wound. You need a hospital. She shook her head. No time, Ethan, listen to me. Her eyes darted toward me, filled with pain and something like fear. She's not lying, Isabella rasped. Grace didn't work for your father willingly, but there's something else he didn't tell you. Ethan leaned closer. What? Isabella took a trembling breath. Your father's not the only one responsible for the crash. There was another investor involved, the one funding the research. He wanted your mother dead, too. Ethan frowned. Who? She coughed, struggling to speak. His name is David Callahan, Grace's former boss. My blood ran cold. Ethan's gaze whipped toward me, shock flooding his face. Grace, that's the man you... Yes, I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. I didn't know what he was doing back then, but I recognized that name. Isabella reached into her pocket, pulling out a crumpled photograph, Richard and David shaking hands outside the same company I once worked for. They both profited from your mother's death, she said weakly. And now that Richard's gone, David's next in line to clean it up. The cabin lights flickered. Ethan's head snapped up. What was that? A second later, a bullet shattered the window. We dropped to the floor as gunfire ripped through the walls. Ethan grabbed me, pulling me behind the table for cover. They found us again. Isabella winced, clutching her side. It's not his men this time, she gasped. It's Callahan's. Ethan's face hardened. Then it ends tonight. He turned to me, gripping my shoulders. Grace, there's a trapdoor under the rug, a crawl space. Hide there with her, I'll draw them away. No, I screamed. I'm not losing you too. He looked at me with desperate tenderness. You won't, but if I don't stop them, none of us make it out. Tears streamed down my face. Ethan, he kissed my forehead, whispered, I love you, and disappeared into the smoke. Gunfire echoed outside. I held Isabella close as she whispered through tears, he's just like his mother, brave to the end. I wanted to believe he'd come back, but deep down, as the gunshots faded into silence, something inside me broke. Then the door creaked open. I turned, expecting Ethan, but froze. A man in a black coat stepped through, his voice smooth and calm. Hello, Grace, he said with a chilling smile. It's been a long time. It was David Callahan. The cabin door groaned as it swung shut behind him. David Callahan stood there like a ghost from another life, older, colder, but with the same calculating eyes that once haunted my nightmares. He smiled faintly. Grace, you still hide well. My heart pounded. What are you doing here? He stepped forward slowly, boots creaking on the wooden floor. Cleaning up what Richard couldn't. I positioned myself in front of Isabella's bleeding body.